Hi, welcome to Stop Stigma, Start Healing, an Equitas Health podcast. In a world without stigma, we can ask for help, we can find comfort in community, we can heal together. Thanks for tuning in. Now here's Miles with today's episode.
Hello, my name is Miles, and I am your host of Stop Stigma, Start Healing, the raw and uncensored podcast where we talk openly and unapologetically about our lives as trans, lesbian, bi, gay, queer, and HIV positive humans. Our goal is to stop the stigma that prevents us from getting the health care we deserve. Each episode will feature real people in our community in conversation and storytelling. My disclaimer: the experiences shared here are valuable and important. They are based on the lives of those in this space and some of you who are listening. Prepare to be educated, shocked, seen, triggered, and informed. No matter your response, keep the conversation going. We are stronger together. Start healing. Today's topic is on HIV and AIDS and the long-term survivor edition. I really struggled with what to call this, but I wanted to do 2 episodes on HIV and AIDS in our community. And because I think there are different stories based on when you were first introduced to HIV and AIDS. I think as we know that historically in the 80s and 90s, it was a disease that often meant a death sentence. And nowadays, getting the diagnosis has a very different meaning. So I want to share those experiences in the next episode. But this one specifically, I wanted to make sure that we got to really honor some of the experiences of some pretty amazing people I know that have been living with HIV and AIDS for a long time. And so with that being said, I'm going to open us up to do introductions. So tell us your first name, your pronouns, and what you want the audience to know about you. And I'll just start with Chris.
Oh, okay. I'm Chris. I am a 64-year-old gay white male. I have 3 children. I have grandchildren. I have all of the fun stuff that goes along with a family. I am originally out of Toledo, and I say that with a little bit of embarrassment. But I'm who I am, and I don't apologize if I offend people.
Great. And we'll hand the mic over to you.
Okay, well, I am Francesca. I am a trans woman. I'm HIV positive. I do define myself as a heterosexual woman. And I was born and raised in Florida. That's my second time living in Ohio, Columbus specifically. Columbus is home to me. It will always be home. And this is where I call home. It's where I find people like me. So I've stayed. I don't have children. I don't have grandchildren. I do have chosen children who call me Aunt Frenchie. I have chosen adults and members of this community who call me Mama, which is a title I wear with great honor.
We're so pleased to have you here. And our third guest.
Hi, I'm Mitch. I go by he, him pronouns. I am a big old flaming, you know what. Have been for as long as I can remember, but didn't come to that decision to share that information early on. I am positive. I'm involved in the Columbus Gay Men's Chorus, which is actually part of my chosen family. I have a 12-step fellowship that I belong to that is predominantly gay and lesbian, which I get a lot of support from. And I go to Scrabble and lose a lot. So, and I've been in, Columbus since 1984. I had to leave Eastern Ohio for my sanity, among other things.
Great. Well, so I'm so glad you're all three here. And I wanted to just sort of set the stage a little bit without telling or retelling the story of the AIDS, HIV epidemic or pandemic. I was looking that up. Why was it not considered a pandemic?
I thought it is.
Is it? Okay, good. Because I always hear the word epidemic and I'm like, that's a pandemic. But anyway,
It is a pandemic.
it is a pandemic, right? It's all over the world. And so some of the numbers that we know, which I think are just incomprehensible, that since the beginning of the pandemic, 84 million people have been diagnosed with HIV and AIDS. 40 million of those have passed away. 38 million of those continue to survive today. And I was trying to how do you even make sense of those numbers? That's beyond comprehension. When I looked at the population of Canada, I think it's like 26 million. So if you think at 84 million people, that's almost 3 times the population of Canada. I was trying to compare it to something, and I don't even know what that's like because I know Canada's a big country and not overpopulated like the United States of America. So anyway, I invited you in today because I really wanted to make sure that we record your stories, that we share what your experiences have historically been like interfacing with healthcare, being a part of the community, and then what it's like today. There are people at home that might be listening into this. We know that a lot of long-term survivors are less ambulatory, are more at home, and less engaged in the community than they were probably 10, 20, 30 years ago. And I just want to make sure that they're seen and they're heard. And I thought of you three as really the right people to help kind of destigmatize their experience. And so we're going to start off with, please share with us and the listeners at home your HIV story. And I'm not really going to shape what that needs to look like. I just wanted to hand that over to you and tell the things that you thought were important. And you can go in any order. I'm not going to call you out.
Well, I'm getting the look, so I'll go first.
Ladies first.
I will just say, for me, growing up as a young male in Florida, in a very rural area, I can remember in 1981 this coming to be, and I can remember all the stories about the raid children, Ryan White, everything else happening, and the fear happening. And I was like, well, I've got to do something. Something has to be done. Everyone's in fear. And, I'm a person of faith also. So I'll just throw it out there. I'm also recently ordained and licensed by the state of Ohio since 2014. So I can marry you, bury you, and baptize children, all of that for you. But I will say that, whenever it was a very tough struggle growing up, knowing who I was in a very rural area and knowing this was happening and trying to put on that hyper masculine sense of I can't live in fear. And then I went shortly into Marine Corps after graduating. I got dismissed because of being called effeminate, blah, blah, blah. So the long story short is that I went through a whole lot of processes. I did drag, and I can remember back in 1984, 85, whenever I did one of my first drag shows. And it was our drag queens, our lesbians, our trans women were doing the work of caring for those with HIV. And we were running security. If you didn't have to perform, you were running security at someone's house, protecting them from the family coming in. But I can remember a time when churches were building double doors because you would have a funeral leaving and then another funeral coming in. But in 1985, I can remember specifically hearing by the year 2010, and you would know someone who was living with, affected, or had been diagnosed with HIV. So I find it alarming here in 2022 people are less educated about HIV, or when you talk about HIV, the question is, "Oh my gosh, it's still around. I thought it was over. I thought it was dead." But I will just say I was a victim of a rape and a carjacking from leaving from heading to a drag show in Columbus shortly after my divorce. And so, yeah, I was carjacked, I was raped, I was held hostage for 3.5 days. I played dead, but um, I was eventually thrown in the ditch. But and I also say I that this HIV diagnosis saved my life too. So and we'll get into that later. But I don't want to take time away from Chris and Mitch because I can talk forever.
Well, thanks for sharing that. Those are things I didn't even know, Francesca. So thank you for sharing that.
You want me to go next?
You can go next because I'm the old guy.
Oh, yes, you are. Thank goodness. Well, I guess I'll go sort of chronological. I knew about HIV. I did my senior paper in college was the Homophile Initiative, which of course I didn't get an A on. But I remember reading the articles about the 5 guys in Los Angeles that were had a strange new pneumonia that nobody understood why they had it. And so it was always at the back of my mind when I came down to Columbus that there was something out there. I probably, the first few years I was in Columbus in the early 80s were definitely a lot of partying and didn't pay attention to a lot of stuff that happened outside of me. But in August of 89, I ended up in the hospital with, I had a cerebral hemorrhage and viral meningitis. I was there for 10 days and tested negative. And then when I got out, went to the doctor, he's like, oh, okay, you should go back and test again in 6 months. And then February 2nd, 1990, the Western Blot came back positive after the ELISA had come back positive. And that was when I found out that I was HIV positive. I crossed the threshold into what they used to call full-blown AIDS in June of 96. And there was I lost insurance because I got fired from a job that didn't fire me because I was HIV positive. I might have believed them until they actually said that to me, but they were supposedly covering their asses. So we were doing watching and waiting on my T cells to see when they would drop. And that's when I could start drug treatment and then maybe have money to pay for the medications, which I didn't have at that point, or to pay for the blood work, which I didn't have at that point. So we watched and waited and watched and waited. And then the next thing you knew, I went from 280 to 50 and my viral load was 350,000. And that was actually the first time I'd ever had a viral load done. And like Francesca, I'm lucky. I was right at the advent of the protease inhibitors at that point, which were really a turning point, and people were bouncing back. I remember the first couple healing weekends I went to, it was 18 months was considered a long-term survivor of an AIDS diagnosis. Okay.
Thanks, Mitch.
Okay, Mitch.
Hand that over to Chris.
And they hand it to me. I came out late in life. I came out when I was 40, and I moved to Columbus from Toledo, and all of a sudden became like a kid in a candy store. And I had people telling me, oh, Chris, don't do this. Don't do this. You're going to regret it. You're going to get something. And I ended up with all the other STDs, but HIV never showed up. And then on the 8th of May of 2001 at 4:23 p.m., my primary care physician asked me why I thought I may have tested positive for HIV, and the world stood still. I went into a deep depression and had to just tell myself, this is not going to take you out. You don't, there's better meds, and don't think about all of your friends that have died. So I picked myself up, dusted myself off, licked my wounds, so to speak, and got back out active in the world. And 6 weeks later, at a Columbus Gay Men's Chorus cast party, I came out publicly with it. And it was like taking the weight of the world off my shoulders. I didn't feel that I had to hide anything. I knew I didn't dare let my family know. I come out of a Baptist background that they would have just run me up the flagpole. So I jumped right into clinical trials at Ohio State. And that way, all of my medications and all of my care was being covered through the AIDS clinical trial group. And my family didn't need to know because my ex-wife worked for the insurance company that I carried my insurance through. And I knew if HIV crossed, somebody's desk, they'd be right over to her. So I got into the trials unit, started out on a 4-drug cocktail, and it was at that time trying to figure out if it was what works the best: 4 drugs, 3 drugs, 2 drugs, 18 pills, whatever. And I just kept going and going. I was fortunate enough, being in the trials, to be overseen by what I consider to be one of the best HIV doctors in the country. And Dr. Pera always made sure that everything was going right for me. And here I am, 20 plus years later, and I'm still kicking, and don't ever expect HIV or AIDS to knock me down.
I think that's important. Talking about the clinical trials, Ohio State Hospital is one of the national.
It's one of the leading hospitals in the nation.
And if someone can gain access to that clinical trials unit, you're really set, and it's really good. Not everybody can do that, but at least you can go in there and get information and referrals.
I will highly agree with that. And I will say, back in the 80s and 90s, it was really scary because as Mitch and Chris were talking about, if you knew someone who was working in insurance and they knew you, even within our community, if you knew someone who was working insurance, and you didn't dare tell them you had just tested positive because they were getting somebody else, it was very, very scary to get insurance. It was very scary hooking up. It was scary. And I will say, just like Chris said, I can remember going to clinical trials as that gay male after testing positive. And I can even remember the fear, because I can remember going to, I didn't believe my results. Once at the hospital, I went to the old health department down on Washington Street that no longer even exists there. And I mean, it was so scary. I think my tennis shoes were stuck there when they demolished the building. But I paid for 5 rapid tests, and you had to pay for rapid tests back then, and it was $10 a test. And they were like, we'll test you all day long, but it's still going to come back positive. And then I was sent to Dr. Pera who has since retired, but I was also working in food service, waiting tables. I couldn't disclose my status, but I was taking 18, 20 pills a day. And back then it was like, and you had to take it with pasta. You had to take it with cheese. You had to avoid dairy. And you would set alarms every 2 or 3 hours, or you would have a buddy who was calling you saying, "Hey, have you taken your pills?" Well, it's because yes, and we still have Lazarus men and Lazarus women walking around today. We don't talk about, and those were the men and women who were told get their affairs in order because you won't survive and go max out all your credit cards. I was told that, and I said, I'm I am not a gallon of milk. I'm not going to expire. And I said, I'm a fighter, Dr. Para. I'm not giving up. And I will tell you, I have taken 23 years now. I have taken 23 years, which were not promised to me. And I hope I've made a difference with all those 23 years. But I think it's also important for those listening and those who don't know terminology. It is not okay to call someone living with HIV dirty or use the word clean or dirty. You are clean. You take a shower. You are important. You are valuable, and you are seen, and you make a difference. And I want you to know that. If you hear nothing else from me, I want you knowing you are clean and you are valid, and you did nothing wrong and contracting this. Absolutely nothing.
Find community and connection with Living Positively, a support group for long-term survivors of HIV. Join us on the first and third Thursday of each month from 10 to 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Meetings are online and in person. Learn more about Living Positively and all of our support groups and services at equitashealth.com/starthealing. Now, back to the episode.
Yeah, can I jump in? Because you're making some really good points. And actually, I want to parlay back and see if I can touch on something that you had said, Chris, when you mentioned, we're going off script here a little bit.
Uh-oh.
When you had mentioned when the tester came in and said, or your physician said, what did you do to get HIV?
Mm-hmm. Why did this come up as HIV positive?
Right. Why is such a judgment word, right?
Yes.
So it's back, the words and then our interaction with the healthcare community, these very judgy, shamey sort of language, I think impacts.
And he told me, he says, you have to, tomorrow when you're home, you have to go have a Western blot done. If that comes back positive, he says, this wasn't just a mistake. And I was just like, it blew me off my feet. It blew me off my feet. And of course the Western blot came back, and I then went over to a doctor at Riverside initially, and my viral load was almost 800,000. My CD4 was at 203. And he's like, well, he says, we need to wait for your CD4 to drop down to 50 before we're going to start medication. And I'm like, oh, no. And I never saw him again. And that's the following day I went over to OSU and got into the clinical trials. And by the time I got on meds, I was diagnosed as AIDS by the numbers. Because back then, if you drop below 200, infections or not, you were classified as AIDS. So here I am, and it didn't stop me.
So, I think I'm really lucky. I've had, my doctor has been in this, it's not the exact same doctor, but there were two of them that practiced together, and one of them retired, and one still is around. And I'm really lucky because he's an infectious disease expert, and I did not experience any of those types of discriminations against HIV. The only time was one time going into the emergency room at Mount Carmel was I felt that the nurse there didn't want to take care of me and like was scared.
Mm-hmm.
But
we're going way off script, but on in that sort of vein, what about like in the early days of your diagnosis, even sharing with like your dentist? I mean, they would ask that question. How was that? Your pharmacist?
My
Yeah.
dentist never had a problem.
Okay.
And I really haven't run into, other than my initial diagnosis, I have not run into any really negative comments from medical professionals. Now, there's been other people that have had their fair say, but my doctors, I'm very upfront with them right off the bat. And then it takes away from the shoulda, coulda, woulda.
Well, so then to follow up with what you were saying about language, getting back on script. So talk to us about how the community supported you initially, and then maybe what the community support looks like now. And when I say community, I mean chosen family, the people you spend time with, the organizations you're involved with, your community where you live, those sorts of ideas of community.
so, like I said, I'm in a 12-step fellowship, and that was before my diagnosis, and so they were partially family, and I had a lot of support from them. And I have friends, 35 years later, that are very supportive. I joined the chorus because I needed to include something in my life because I had just found out that I was positive, and then I incorporated them into my family. Now, I did my physical family, my biological family. I had probably about maybe 2 years after I was diagnosed. I can't remember exactly when it was. I went home and I said, I have 2 things that I need to tell you. I have HIV, the virus that leads to AIDS, and I'm gay.
Oh, the 1-2 punch, I call
Double
it.
whammy.
So, and the reason I did that was because of, would there be a place that I could be taken care of if I needed that? If I was if I was getting ready to go out of this world, would I have a safe place to be? And I needed to know that. And I found out that they would be there for me. The gay thing took a little bit longer. And there's still lots of judgment there, but cool. That's it.
Well, for me, it was strange because a lot of people I thought in the gay community and performers I was performing with, and I didn't realize it at the time. Whenever I came in and I just said, well, y'all, I just tested positive and I don't know what the F I'm going to do. And they said, well, girl, go on home, take care of yourself. I thought they were shunning me. I thought they were disowning me, and I was like, oh my gosh, my own community's turning against me. So I call them my hillbilly family from rural Florida, and I told my dad, and my dad was just like, okay, so and you're left-handed, and then even though I am right hand dominant, and he said we're gonna get through this. But and then my brother, who was going through cancer at the time, and looked at me and said, "You've always struggled with your identity. When are you gonna start living in your truth? This is the time for you to wake up and make a difference." And friend, he said, "I'm dying. You have a chance to live." And I'm like, yes, I know, and I should be dying because I'm the single one, and you have a 6-month-old baby girl. You should be staying, but he's like, no, you've got a purpose. So, but I was always close with him. But he gave me, I think he gave me my fight, and my sister, who is younger than me, I always tell her she is my biggest littlest sister, but one of the most powerful, strongest women I know, because I think a lot of how three boys treated her, and she would whip our butts, but there was strength in that. So I learned a lot of strength becoming my authentic self through her. So yeah, I know I'm off script.
You're
I
totally
went
fine.
totally
No,
blank.
those are, I mean,
But
that's really great insight into family and family support. Chris, do you?
Yeah. Well, Miles, I've talked to you about some of my family, so you understand. Like I said, I came out at 40, and the old saying, like a bull in a china shop, I came out like a bull in a china shop. Lots of china broke, and I was basically told, don't come back home. And so I left. I mean, I went back and came back to Columbus, and it's like, okay, this is all well and good. And I felt, because I was still being insured through my wife, that I needed to tell her so that she did not get blindsided. So I told her, and the first thing her first comment was, well, do I need to go get tested? And I'm like, Kim, we've been separated for 5 years. I think you're okay. And she just took it okay. She's, of course, the Baptist in her was, well, I'm going to pray for you. And I'm like, well, thank you. Pray for me, but not about me. And
that is very important.
it is. It's a major change in how it's perceived by the person that's being prayed for.
Exactly.
And
I said the exact same thing to my family.
yeah. So I started the stuff, and I had joined the chorus right after I'd moved to Columbus, and they became my adopted family because my own family was like, go screw yourself. And when I got my diagnosis, first person I called was our artistic director, because he was a very close friend. And I told him, and he said, anything that you need, just let me know. I'll be there for you. And then I approached a couple of other chorus members that I was very close with and let them know. And I needed some type of a support mechanism, because I'm living alone in a city that I don't hardly know anybody other than my chorus family. And I had this concert coming up, and I don't remember the name of it, but part of the lyric was, took a chance, changed my way of life. I didn't think I was going to be able to do the concert. That just cut right through me. And I just did a lot of retrospect, and it's like, no, I need to do this. I have to do this. And David Mansour knew my situation, and he was very supportive with me. He said, if you can't sing, I understand. And I did the concerts, and I ended up being Chorus Girl of the Year,
Which is a big honor.
Yes. And it kind of caught me off guard. And I was just like, okay. And I had to go up in front of everybody in the hall, and they tried to put a tiara on me, but I have no hair. So it just kind of slid off, and my scepter. And I just started talking. And I don't even remember everything that I said, but part of it was, this concert almost didn't happen for me because 5 weeks ago I tested HIV positive. And everybody was just like, hugs and hugs and hugs. And I walked back to my chair and sat down, and my friend Tony, that was sitting next to me, said, that took a lot of balls. And I said, well, either balls or no common sense. I'll let you know in a couple of weeks. And after that happened, and I was public with it, telling 125 gay men sitting in a room that is like, okay, if this is working and not working against me now out in public, it's not going to work against me either. I won't let it. And I just keep on going. The only family question that I had was from my kids. And I told them in the car one night as I was taking them back to Toledo. And my oldest daughter, who's just like her dad, said, well, are you going to die? And I'm like, I don't plan on it. Why? She says, well, then fine. So it took a while for the rest of my family to kind of adapt to it. And then I was backed into a corner by my older sister to either tell my mother or she was going to do it for me. And so the partner that I had at the time was bipolar, and he just went off. And so we sat mom down out on the sun porch and said, this is what's going on, because she wanted to know why there was so much argument going on out in the garage. And I just told her, I said, Mom, I'm HIV positive. And she says, what's that mean? I says, that means that I have the virus that can cause AIDS. And she's like, why are you telling me this? And I said, because she said, if I didn't tell you, she was going to do it for me. And my mom looked at my sister and she said, I have enough things to worry about with your father's health. She says, I certainly did not need this added to the mix. And that was kind of a surprise coming out of my mom. And to this day, she still asks me about my counts. And she's 91. And she has used my HIV diagnosis. She said something to one of her neighbors who lost her son in 1995 to AIDS. And it just has created a really big dialogue for me when I'm down at Mom's in South Carolina to be who I am and not be afraid to talk about it.
Great. Francesca, I saw your hand up.
I just wanted to say I can relate to you, Chris, because I can remember I said I've lived in Columbus twice, but very few people know when I lived in Columbus the first time. I was attending World Harvest Bible College. I was married at the time. I was living on the east side, and yes, I was trying to suppress and pray the gay away. And I was in every single pray the gay, pray this desire away, pray that desire away. And I'm here to tell you, the more you try praying it away, the more it will intensify it, and the more your truth will come out. But I can also, my wife at the time went to the school and told them I had done drag in the past, blah, blah, blah. I was expelled from school. Long story short, I came home to this 2-bedroom apartment. I had nothing. And the only thing I knew with a roll of toilet paper in the bathroom, and the quickest way for me to survive and get food and make some money was trying to find some way to create a dress, go to a thrift store, find a dress, try to borrow money from somebody, and get on stage, find some heels, get some hose on, get some makeup on, so that I could eat that night. And that is part of my truth. And I will say that as a person of faith, I support you. You don't have to pray away anything, and it is important how you pray for someone, because I had so many people say, "I'm going to pray for your healing." I don't need healed. I told them I have been healed. I know my God. My God ordained my steps. I know this. I know that. This is my truth. I'm going to walk in it. I'm going to own it. And this is who I am. and people now will tell you two things you will know about Francesca in the first minute. One, she is trans, and two, she is living with HIV before something else comes out, because those two things, if you have a fear of those or prejudice, I don't need you around. I got to protect my sphere.
Yeah, I ran into it thrown in my face by one of my sisters that, well, you got this because God's trying to get your attention to come back to him. And I'm like, excuse me. I said, if, he's known everything from the beginning of time, has known everything going on. He knew I was going to come out gay. He knew I was going to get HIV. So you can't blame this on me. You can't blame this on God.
If we were to really place the blame, we would place it within society, because society forces you to live a heteronormative life.
Mm-hmm.
And because if we were true about things, trans people, gay people, we've been around forever. We have been here since the beginning of time, and we have been celebrated in many cultures and religions, and especially trans people used to hold very high places and authority as bankers, rulers, and deities within governments and that. So if there's anyone to place blame, it is those forcing you to deny and live a lie that is untrue to you, and that is society's problem.
The more,
it is not ours.
Yeah, the more you two talk, the more I'm writing down ideas to bring you back for other episodes. So just be careful. I wanted
bring me back.
Mitch's hand went up just a little bit, and I just want to make sure he had some space to
I
step
just
in.
wondered if he wanted to talk about some things like alternative. There were lots of support groups when I first found out, and a lot of them were alternative because the drugs either didn't exist or they were very, very toxic. And then, which leads me into side effects from some of the early medications that we took, and what they, especially Chris and at OSU.
Oh yeah.
I mean, can I start?
Yeah, please go for it.
So I remember that there was a Monday night support group, and a lot of times it just seemed like the Monday night support group was like, okay, who's died in the last week? And then there was Thursday nights, had multiple different Eastern type of approaches, sometimes nutritional, sometimes meditation. But I really latched into those things early to help me cope with my diagnoses. And there were, we went to, I probably went to a funeral every couple months for 5 or 6 years, at least. The side effects of medications I had and still have, I had peripheral neuropathy. I lost most of the feeling below my knees. And I didn't notice it until one time I looked down and I was bleeding because I had gotten a huge splinter and I didn't feel it at all. So, of course, I had to go off of that medication and try a different one. I developed kidney stones because of one of the protease inhibitors that I was on. I get to have some lovely blasting to my kidney stones done next month.
Yay. That sounds exciting.
Yeah.
Yes.
And, I was really sick. Social Security officer came into my hospital room and helped me fill out the paperwork to get the disability. And I didn't want to do that again. So one of the early protease inhibitors I was on, the first 3 months, I threw up every single time I took the pills. And I would catch them and I would rinse them off and I would retake them because I didn't want to die.
Well, yeah, you had to.
And that was not uncommon. And it was not uncommon back in the in the 80s or 90s, whenever someone passed, you were taking someone's meds and you were giving those meds to somebody else because, again, and insurance was scary. It was scary to talk about insurance. So you were passing meds around that I don't encourage that by any means now. But back then,
It was
that is how
reality.
many
It
of
was
us
reality.
had to survive.
Yeah.
We were taking a dead friend's meds. Literally, we were taking one of our friend's meds who had died. We were taking their meds to survive and live.
No, that's just really sort of what I wanted to bring up, that, because there was a time period there where there was a desire for HIV negative gay men to seroconvert. And I don't know if that's still, I don't know.
It's still,
I don't know if it's,
breeders are still out there.
if it's still out there, but I it's not all fun and games,
let me just say, we still have those bug chasers out there. And many of you who know you equals you, we still have the chasers coming because we have youth who think, hey, I want to get this. I want you to purposely infect me because I can get free rent, free food stamps, free this, free that. Let me tell you, it is not easy living on Social Security. I'll just be honest, kids. I'll tell you, I live on $1,200 a month, and without getting support, I would be on these streets of Columbus, or I would have to be doing sex work to survive, to have a place to live. And that's not okay. And it's not okay to go chasing this.
The whole chaser thing. I had one young man that was just continually bothering me, wanting me to breed him. Breed me. I want the disease. And I had not met him face to face. I had met him online, and I said, I need to sit down with you at the coffee table, and you need to explain to me why you want this. I said, doesn't mean that I'm going to give it to you, but I need to, for my own knowledge, I need to know why you are so eager to get this. So we sat down and talked. And he told me, he says, if you're just a run-of-the-mill gay man, you won't get it. But he says, if you're really hot, you're going to get it. He says, it's a badge of honor. And I told him, I says, that is the most twisted mindset I have ever heard. And he says, well, if you won't do me, I'll find somebody else who will. And he did. And he sent me a message, and he's like, I tested positive. And I'm like, okay. I says, what meds? He says, they're having trouble finding meds for me because they said my strain is resistant to almost everything out there.
That is another thing we need to talk about, because people want to be purposely infected. And if I'm telling you, your dating game changes when you contract HIV. The rejection you get just from saying I am HIV positive. I had 2 months ago, I was talking with the guy. I was just talking with him, and he said, I got to go buy a new phone because I'm talking with you and you're HIV positive. I said, you are in your house on the east side of Columbus. I'm on the west side. There is no contact. There is no sexual contact. But this is the mindset of some people. And we really have to talk about the law as an HIV positive person, and as someone who tells people what they tell you when you test positive is that if you don't tell someone before engaging in sex, now you have to know how that other person defines sex. And sex in many cultures could be considered holding hands, a kiss. It could be many things, but you could be held accountable and be arrested for not disclosing. And I tell people this: I make sure there's a third party. I get text. I make sure you understand. You have to tell me you can understand what it means for me to be living with HIV. Also, furthermore, a second part of this law, which they don't tell you, is is that if you are living with HIV and you're out with somebody and you go home with them and you're intoxicated, even though and your partner may have consented for that hookup, and your partner who you are engaging or partners, if you're in a plural um, situation, you must tell them, and they must be competent and coherent. If they are influenced by pot, tina, whatever, alcohol, you have to put the brakes on and say, no, I cannot engage in sexual activity. You have got to CYA as an HIV positive person, and these are laws on the books. People don't tell you the second part I just told you all, but it's very scary, and you have to know your law, folks.
Sure, there's right. So I mean, for those listening, there are state laws that criminalize HIV transmission or alleged transmission in Ohio, and there's an effort in the works to modernize those laws.
Yeah, because I was talking with somebody not too long ago, and it was not even attempted transmission, failure to disclose.
Yeah.
And he said that we've got to get this off the books. He says, U equals U. He said, this has to come off the books.
Failure to disclose can get you, and it's on you as the HIV positive person to prove. So this is why I'm taking my next step. I'm going to become a notary so that I can help this community and come and notarize and put a seal on there.
Well, I'll go ahead and
No, I just go say, and there are places I'm thinking of that place and that person that was incarcerated in Iowa. It's a felony, and you go to jail, and it happens.
Yeah, it does. It happens here in Ohio.
We have a young African-American male in New York State who told his status, and he is still in a mental hospital for the rest of his life, even though his sentence is done. And you look up New Sean Williams. It's very, very real, people. It's scary.
I knew this would pull the belly fire out of Francesca, which is why I'm glad that she joined the conversation. But we have the studio for an hour, and there is probably 10 hours of content that we could kiki about today. And I want to be mindful of our time together and make sure that we can get back to the final questions, which, how has your relationship with healthcare changed over the years?
With me, I really have not had a negative problem with healthcare because of the clinical trials. I was in those trials for 21 years, and I just recently came out, but my primary care doctor has taken a lot of Dr. Paris patients, so he's also now my infectious disease doctor as well, and I've always had insurance. And what my insurance didn't cover, Ryan White would pick up. And at this particular time, I'm in limbo. My former insurance ended July 31st. I had to buy 2 months worth of coverage on the marketplace, which has just been a disaster. And the last 5 days, I have probably spent 15 hours on the telephone trying to get my HIV injections taken care of. Who's going to pay for it? What's going to pay for it? And I got to the point, it's like, you know what? I still have my old cocktail in the house. I have 4 bottles of it. I may just say, screw the shots, go back on my Juluca. And once I've got onto Medicare, then I can go back and everything will start to fall into place.
That's right. You are that old.
I am that old, yes. Yeah, I
The
turned 65 the
shade.
day after, I think it's day after your birthday.
Yes. But I'm 4 years younger.
Yeah. So he says.
So, Mitch, how about you? How has healthcare changed for you, and including things like medication dosing?
I think the thing that people need to realize is that the medication that I am on now, my antiviral medication, if I would have to pay for it, it's over $3,000 a month. I could not afford that on the disability that I have or my part-time job and continue to pay any bills. I just couldn't afford it. I'm fortunate that I get my medications through Ryan White because I'm poor enough. I'm fortunate that I got sick enough that I became disabled, so I was able to get eventually Medicare. So and I have Medicare. All of my referrals to my doctor are from my infectious disease doctor, so they know up front, what they're getting with me. So all those doctors know.
The cost of these medications is just astronomical. I went from a 1 pill a day, and because of other health issues this year, I was missing too many doses. I'd forget to take my morning meds. So my doctor said, would you consider doing the shots? He says, it's 2 shots every 2 months. I said, Cabernuva, I've heard about it. Does it really work? I've been on it now for 5 months. And I didn't realize until just this past week how expensive those 2 shots are. It's over $9,700 every other month. That's crazy. But if it keeps me going.
Thank you, Big Pharma.
Yeah.
Yes, hello, Big Pharma. I will say, coming out as trans back in 1999 after testing positive, I was fortunate that the doctor I was going to identified as lesbian at the time. She's since retired. I had a conversation and I said, I know I need hormones. Otherwise, I'm going on the black market. I'm going to go get them. Otherwise, I'm going to wrap a car around this pole out front. And she said, no, and we're getting you on estrogen. We're getting you on estrogen shots. I can tell you back in 1999, we didn't know much about trans and HIV. What I can tell you is that back in 1999, when I wanted to have my surgery and to have gender confirmation and lose the male anatomy and become female anatomy, I was told I would never have that opportunity. And now because of U equals U and because of universal precautions, blah, 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 I had my surgery in 2019. But what I can tell you is that trans care has come a very, very long way. I believe if you are trans and you want the care, it may require you to move to a more metropolitan area to get that care and to get the competent care you need. But I mean, if you need it, you're going to make a way. I also want to say I had one physician who said, I tell you what, I wanted to meet you on Thursday, and this was going into a holiday weekend. And then she said, I know nothing about trans care, but I want to meet you. I want to sit down with you. And I just want to know, what books do I need to do? And can you point me in the way of research? And she said, and my husband and my kids are going off to my in-laws for the weekend. I'm staying home. I mean, she said, I am going to study. And she said, I'm bringing you back in on Tuesday at 11. she came back in, and at the time we didn't even have markers to identify as trans people. And whenever I told her that, she said, so, and she got it. Trans people are not men who have sex with men. You are trans. And so she helped me fight to get those boxes on the forms. So I think from someone just investing and being honest and being real with me and saying, I don't know. But I will also say, and I have said this in other conversations, I did have a case manager one time who said, I can't deal with a tranny. I can help gay men, but trannies are just out of my box. And I'm not gonna deal with a tranny. And folks, I know it's wrong to say that, but back then this is how they called this, was a tranny. And I was like, excuse me, I'm still a human being. You have no right telling me that. I went into into one of the director's offices. I can't remember whose, but I just walked in as though I owned the place. And I said, and your case manager so and so just said this and this to me, and they cannot help me. And I said, I am still a human being, and the purpose when you're human is to be operating and being humane with compassion and with empathy. And everyone deserves compassion and empathy.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Thank you. And I appreciate you bringing that to the table. That's important message for people to hear. Final words. We're near the end here, and I want to make sure that you were able to get out. I pulled you all the way out here outside in the burbs and
I hate the suburbs.
and I asked you to speak about really personal things, really to help people with stigma, and make sure that people knew that their voices were being echoed. But I want to make sure that you have the opportunity to say the things that you wanted to say coming out.
I think the only thing that I would like to say is that if you are a young queer identifying individual or not, you have a lot of wealth of knowledge and information with your elders, and get in contact with those elders, whether they be HIV. We can definitely tell you stories, so that we can pass it on to the next generation.
Don't ever be afraid to research and ask. That is the key. Knowledge is power.
I am trying to summarize my paragraph because I want to say so much, but this is what I want you to know. One, I am often asked as a trans woman why I show up and why I demand space, and if not, I bring a folding chair because I learned in 1972 as a young kid, if there isn't space for me, I'm bringing a folding chair. Thank you, Shirley Chisholm. I give honor where it's due. I want you to know I don't care. HIV touches every single socioeconomic race. It combines us. It brings equality and dimension to every single one of us and our stories. Every single one of you are valid, and I want you to know I show up and I show out and I fight for you, because if not me as a trans woman and of like 56 years of age, who will, and I will say it takes balls to do this. It takes balls to stand up and be rejected and to be laughed at, but I will do it. If it saves your life, I will do it. And folks, you have living history and you have a responsibility and a challenge to find those with this living history and learn it because you won't find it in the textbook. And with that, I just want you knowing, and you are valid, you are seen, you are heard, and I love you no matter what. And you can't do anything about it.
Well, you just said all of the things that I was going to say to close this discussion out today. As I mentioned in the beginning, there is way more content here than we could get through in an hour. And I knew that coming in, and I appreciate you allowing me to shape it as much as we could to get the central message out and to get your voices heard. So I appreciate you taking your time out and being here and sharing your stories with us. And for those listening, please keep talking about this. Share it on social media, share it with your friends, your family, have these conversations. Tune into some of our other episodes because we're going to be addressing many of these other topics that have come up today in some of our other episodes. And with that, we will sign out of Stop Stigma, Start Healing. Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to Stop Stigma, Start Healing, and for joining us on the journey towards stigma-free and LGBTQ+ affirming healthcare. Learn more about all of our support groups and services at equitashealth.com/starthealing. We'll see you next time.